If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. For one, it's free, and there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will also distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So make sure you download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome to Growth with Portia, a weekly conversation for your personal and professional growth. Here is your host, Portia Booker.
Hey listeners, welcome to Groove with Portia. I'm your host, Portia Booker, and yes, this is my real name. So question for you, did you bring your curious mind today? If so, I don't want to keep you waiting. Let's dive in. This conversation is dedicated to my mother, Sharonne Lopez, who made her transition on July 7, 2022. I'm grateful to have been given a strong role model like you for the past 30 years. Thank you for the legacy you created in this world through your children. Love you always and forever. Now, let's dive into the conversation. So today I am joined by a veteran who is on a mission to spread the word that living your best life is possible. After traveling the world for over 30 years, she created the T.A.P.I.N method: transformation, announce, prepare, imagine, and nurture, to help individuals indeed transform their lives. She is also a best-selling author and host of Talk to Me, where veterans, entrepreneurs, and authors turn their mess into messages. So without further delay, welcome the Soulutionist herself, Miss Brenda Warren. How you doing today, Brenda?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of this special broadcast today that honors your mom. I'm just so humbled and grateful.
Yes, I am too, because we both have something in common, the loss of both of our mothers, and we'll, really dive into that later on in the conversation. And so, Brenda, I always love to still start all my conversations off with gratitude. What would you say you are grateful for today?
Today, I'm grateful for knowing that I can live my best life now, and grateful, like you are, that I had a strong mother that instilled in me the ability to just live my life to the fullest.
I definitely relate to that. I mean, living your best life, we used to see that as just a catchphrase all over social media, on billboards, on license plates, wherever we see them. But now I would say that my mom has transitioned to her next assignment in life. I can see the true possibility of that, because my mom doesn't have to suffer anymore of, her body being weakened from illness, from sickness. And I think too, in the abundant world that we live in, anything is possible. It's mind over matter indeed.
Absolutely, Portia. And the thing about it is, we come to the understanding that we can live our best lives at different stages in our life, because there was a time I thought I was living my best life, and then I hit rock bottom. And once I hit rock bottom, I always say there's no way to go but up once you're down. And so getting to a place of acknowledging my ability to choose the life I live, I get to write the story. And I always say, since I have the pen, I'm going to make it an epic adventure.
And that's the best way to do it, epic.com. And I love what you mentioned, Brenda, just now about living your best life at different stages and different areas of your life. Because I think sometimes when we leave our 20s and go into our 30s, and then for some people into their 40s, I'm hearing a lot of people say that their 30s and 40s and 50s have been the best parts of their life, because what they've grown, they've transformed, they've really invested in themselves instead of investing in the life that other people saw for them. And I love what you mentioned about taking the author pen back, because that was the same for me when I really was struggling mentally. The only thing that died on March 20th, 2017 was me living the life other people wanted for Portia. I took the author pen back, and here I am. I'm like a lot happier with my life. I love myself more, and I invest in me instead of investing in all the common things that other people wanted. So I digress there.
No, you didn't digress. That's absolutely important that you brought that out, because the truth is, at each stage in our life, and it's each milestones, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. For me, I'm about to turn 60 in December. So I'm looking for another best life, because at each stage of my life, I thought I was living my best life. In my 20s, when I was partying and dating and just hanging out there, traveling all over the world, that was my best life. When I was 30, I had gone through a divorce by then, and I'm out here trying to figure out who I am and what I want to be. After my third divorce, I'm asking myself, okay, how many lives will I live that only lives up to the standards of other people? And now at the age of 59, Portia, I can tell you, I have discovered that no is a complete sentence. That when you say no to some things, you're saying yes to other things. And that to live my best life now, unapologetically unstoppable, means that I write the story I want to live, and then I live it full out without apology.
Oh, Brenda, I felt that. No is a complete sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And how often, Brenda, do we as women say no to ourselves, but yes to all the other people?
Portia, if you had opened up people pleaser in the Webster's dictionary, my picture would have been there in triplicate, because I didn't have an off button. I never said no, to my own detriment. I was afraid to say no. I was afraid of what people would think of me or how they would feel about me. And I didn't want to live in a place that I disappointed people. That was my greatest fear, not to disappoint others. I never worried about how I felt about it. But when I discovered that it was okay to say no, that I had the power to say no, and it was my choice to say no, and that saying no simply meaning I was saying yes to what I really wanted. And it's important as women that we begin to understand that no is a complete sentence, that it's okay to say no when you feel it. When people ask me to do something now, I ask myself, is it something I want to do? Why would I want to do it? And if I don't, I simply say no. And when they ask me why, I say, because I'm grown. I have a choice.
On. Come on.
I don't give expert explanations anymore, because I don't think no requires that. As a complete sentence, that's all there is to be said. And I no longer have shame or guilt surrounding my ability to say no. Because, shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. And no is neither of those. No is simply an indication that I'm not willing to do what it is you think I should.
Ooh, and what gives shame power, Brenda? Silence.
Silence.
And a lot of us, we tend to fall in that hamster wheel of shame and guilt because of the societal prescription that we're spoon-fed from childhood. The ideologies that we have to, that it's our obligation, that we should all the time extend our hand. But when are we extending our hand to help ourselves, to give ourselves that same love, loyalty, and happiness that we're often giving to everybody else on that platter of our love and abundance? And so I love the reminder of the word no. The phrase no is a complete sentence. And I had to learn that, because people pleaser, I guess I'm right under you, Brenda, in that dictionary, in the thesaurus of some sort, because I had to learn for myself that I can say no and not give an explanation. And so, Brenda, for you, what would you say it took for you to stop explaining yourself when you said no?
Well, actually, Portia, that came fairly recently. It would say July 26th, 2020. Spoiler alert, and I would say trigger warning. I found myself holding a bottle of pills. My 23-year marriage was in shambles. My kid was about to go to college. I was overweight. I was not living my best life, even though I was helping other women all over the world do that. And I was pulled in so many directions that life held no value for me. But luckily, the gentleman on the other end of the phone convinced me to take one pill, find something to do, and it changed my life. Because when I found that something to do, and I found my voice again, my ability to say no with conviction and not feel guilty about it, when I found that the life I live is my choice, when I discovered that pleasing myself was more important than pleasing others, I think it's something that we should begin as a society to teach all of us, not just girls, but men, but girls in particular, because we're raised to serve. Most of the women I talk to talk about how, oh, be nice, be polite, don't be disagreeable. It's okay to agree to disagree without being disagreeable, but we don't have to be doormats. And it took me till I hit 59 to understand that. So I think it's important that for women in general, and for me myself, is to own our voice, own our choices. You should have said no when you're feeling bad and you're, giving people the side eye because you said you could bake this cake or attend this meeting or do this extra thing that you didn't have time to do. Now you're all stressed out. You should have said no. And when you're saying no, it doesn't mean that's a bad thing. It can simply mean you're saying yes to yourself. You're saying yes to your peace of mind. You're saying yes to your mental well-being. You're saying yes to your healthy well-being, because our health is our wealth. And we are destroying our mental health and our physical health every time we do something that doesn't align with what we say we want in our everyday lives.
Oh, 100%. And I love what you mentioned too, Brenda, about the gentleman on the other end of the phone. He didn't ask you, well, why are you feeling this way? He just told you, just take one, find something else to do. Just that direct but empathetic approach. Instead of prying in, he gave you that space to expound at your leisure. And
Absolutely.
I think that we've lost that art of listening in our society. We listen with the anticipation to talk instead of listening with the urgency to understand and come to a common ground. And I think too, Brenda, what I really love is the fact that you took initiative, you listened, and you didn't say, well, because overthinking, that's another word that I think I fall under too in the dictionary is overthinking a lot. And I love that, because sometimes simplistic is often complex when we become adults, because we feel as though we should know everything. But that asking for help and reaching out for help shows true strength. Definitely does.
And it also led me on the path that I'm on right now. Portia, for the past month and for the remainder of the year, I've been asking people 5 questions, because had I asked myself these 5 questions prior to July 26th, maybe July 26th would not have ever happened. But I thank God for that day, because it was a life-changing event that put me on the path I'm on right now. And here are the 5 questions. What do you want? Why do you want it? How does it benefit you? How does it benefit others? And what are you willing to do to get it? See, oftentimes when you ask somebody, what do they want? They'll tell you what they don't want. I want anybody that's listening, I want you to think about that. What do you want? See, I wanted to live my best life. I wanted to be a smaller weight. I wanted to wake up every morning excited to be alive. But I wasn't. And it wasn't until I got clear on why I wanted that and how that benefited me, how it benefited others, and what I was willing to do to make all of those things happen, that my life began to change. And I was able to develop the T.A.P.I.N method and all the other things that I've been working on over the past year.
I love the first question, Brenda. What do you want? Because truly, how many people can openly share what they want without overthinking it? They can say what they don't want, like you said, but what if you just truly said, I want to be in a rock band. I want to parasail. It's like, again, we're too afraid to disappoint other people. And we got to learn to dance to our own drum beat again and be comfortable in our own skin 100%.
And getting clear on what you want is the first step, Portia, because if you don't know what you want, how do you hit that target if you don't know what you're aiming for?
Oh, 100%. It's, I think a lot of people, especially now, if COVID taught me one thing, Brenda, it taught me the importance of time. It taught me that time was really short and you can't wait for an opportunity to fall into your lap. You have to go for it. It may not all make sense, but you just have to take that first initial step by making or taking some sort of action. So we're going to take our first quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back right here on Group with Portia. I'm joined remotely with the Soulutionist herself, Miss Brenda Warren, and we were just having a great conversation, of course, about no being a complete sentence, not having to explain yourself to anybody, and also being comfortable in your own skin. So, Brenda, we both have something in common: the loss of our beloved mothers. And what would you say, Brenda, helped you the most to grieve in a healthy way when your mom transitioned? Was it reflection? Was it time with friends? Was it taking yourself on a trip? What would you say really helped you to grieve in a healthy way without being crippled?
Well, I'm saddened to say, Portia, that when my mother first passed in 2012, I did not grieve in a healthy way. I brought all of her stuff into my home, and I looked like I was living in an episode of Hoarders because I did not live well mentally, emotionally, or physically with the loss of my mother. I felt like my world had come to an end. And it wasn't until the passing of Dr. Tony Evans' wife that I gained any clarity on the loss of my mother, and that I actually remembered the one thing that she asked me to do on her deathbed. And my mother asked me, she said, "Baby, I need you to make me a promise." I said, "Anything." She said, "Promise me that you will celebrate my life and not live in my death." And I made that promise, but I didn't keep that promise until a few years later when Dr. Tony Evans' wife died and one of his sons was given the eulogy. And he talked about how angry he was with God, because that's where I was. And he began to talk about that he had a conversation, and it went basically, the gist of it was this, that God loved Mama more than I loved Mama. And that either she was going to be healed or she was going to be healed. Either she was going to be set free or she was going to be set free. Either she was going to be delivered or she was going to be delivered. Either she was going to be with family or she was going to be with family. And for some reason, when I heard that shift happened where I was like, oh my God, I get it now. Mama transitioned, but she's not in pain anymore. She is set free. She's delivered. She's with family. She is living her best life in the next life. And all I got to do is celebrate the life that I was privileged to have with my mother until she transitioned. So that's when I began to talk about Mama again. That's when I began to have the joy of the things that I remember growing up, the parties, the love, the hugs, the kisses, the sense that I could do anything. So now I can tell you I am fully embracing the celebration of my mother's life and the phenomenal woman that she was, that I did not recognize when she passed, because I lived in that grief, Portia. When I tell you I was living the episode of Hoarders, everything she owned was in my house. I could not even walk through my house without turning sideways. It is 2022, and I've just gotten rid of about the last of what was my mother's possessions because I couldn't let go. And now I am finally tapping into my own ability to live my best life and not hold on to stuff, because the stuff's not her anyway.
Ooh, ain't that the truth? I love what you mentioned just now, Brenda, about being able to let go, because as we know here, we're creatures of habit. And when I notice when someone transitions, I kind of describe grief as love without direction. It's not in the same direction that we were used to projecting it, right? Because we're used to physically interacting with this person, right? Sitting with them, having coffee, lunch. And so what gives me comfort is the same like you. My mom isn't suffering anymore from her illness. She's able to breathe without restriction. And also I remember the person who my mom is. My mom has always been one to celebrate, to bring positivity, to make other people feel welcome. And so just this past weekend, we had a balloon release in honor of my
Oh,
mom.
that's nice.
And everybody, all our family and friends who came to join in the celebration, nobody left sad.
Yeah.
Everybody felt uplifted. And that's the legacy I wanted to keep going, and the momentum as well about my mother.
Mhm.
And I know it's not easy. I know a lot of people do not have the same fortitude as
Mhm.
I do to speak on this topic of grief, because we both know, Brenda, grief is heavy
It's
for a
very
lot of
heavy.
people.
It's very heavy. And if you don't have the tools to handle the grief, or the people around you to support you through the grief, and part of it, you have to let people support you. See, I didn't want anybody to support me because I was mad at God. I was mad at the world. How dare you take my mother? Because my mother's in our relationship was very rocky. We didn't have the great mother-daughter relationship. We were just starting to develop it, and I felt cheated because we had just got to a place where the anger had subsided, that we enjoyed each other's company. And I had about 6 months of that prior to her passing. Um, and I was looking forward to all the things that this new relationship was going to produce. And I felt like it was snatched from me. So I didn't let anyone support me because I was mad at the world. But when I let go of that anger and began to really grieve in a way that was healthier, I was able to move past it. And like I said, get to a point to where now I can celebrate my mother's life, even the bad stuff that happened with us. But I focus on the good things, because when I was a child, my mother made every day a fun day. I mean, she, like, we didn't just get grilled cheese sandwiches, we got grilled cheese hearts or grilled cheese dinosaurs. She made cakes that were rival anything you see in a bakery. She would ask us what do we want for our birthday, and I would say I want a castle, and I'd get a castle cake or a Barbie cake or stuff, something I brought to my own child. Christmas was the biggest holiday in our life. My mother put Christmas trees in every room of our house. So I took that tradition up when I got older, and to the point of going to the dollar store, buying the little mini Christmas trees and dropping them in everybody's drawer, and the finding the gifts. So holidays were a big deal for her. We had a lot of traditions that made things fun. But the other thing that my mother did was she taught us how to treat other people. My mother was no respecter of person. You could come to my house any day, Portia, and you would see the local drug dealer, a prostitute, and a preacher sitting at my mother's table eating all at the same time, because my mother believed every person mattered.
Ooh, yeah, Brenda, that's exactly the same person who my mom was too. She gave her heart to everybody. Everybody felt loved, supported, included. They were part of the family, no matter what their background was or anything. My mom gave that space. And Brenda, for you, what would you say during your grief really was that moment for you where you're like, I'm able to do things and live again? Now that my mother, I let go of the anger, I let go of the resentment of the lost time that I didn't get to spend with my mother. So, what would you say really helped you during your grief when you felt angry to channel that energy into something else?
It really was the passing of Dr. Tony Evans, his wife, Dr. Evans herself, because when I saw her funeral and I heard what people were saying, and this eulogy by the son gave me a paradigm shift that I needed to walk out of the grief, because I had made it so personal. It was all about me. God didn't like me. God hated me. He was punishing me, when it wasn't about me. I made it about me, but that wasn't it. Also, it was the first time that I actually heard what my mother said. See, I promised it, but I hadn't been able to live it because I was just in anger. Anger clouds things. It makes it very hard to see what's really real, because there was the truth and then there was my truth, you see. And when I moved past the limiting beliefs that God was trying to do something and take something from me, as opposed to it was mom's time. And it was my time to stand on my own 2 feet without the crutch. That she'd already put everything in me that I needed to be successful and to live my best life, and that I was choosing to live in hurt and anger and pain. I was choosing to sit in the cave of despair. And I could walk out of that cave whenever I wanted to, but it took that eulogy to make me walk towards the light of hope, health, and happiness.
Brenda, I love what you mentioned about choice just now, because I think that is a pivotal part of grief is you can choose to allow the grief to cripple you, or you can choose to let the grief channel that energy into something else. And for me, it's, even though for me it's still raw that my mom just recently had her transition, but what keeps me going every day is I hear my mom in the back of my head being my cheerleader every day. Portia, you got to get up. Portia, don't be laying up doing this, doing that. Portia, keep going. Portia, live your life. Because I tell a lot of people, my mom has always been my cheerleader, and she still is. When everybody else was laughing at what I wanted to do and my dreams, my mom said, Portia, go for what you want. Go for whatever it is that you want and be the best person you can be. And that is what brings me comfort every day, is knowing that my mom is still cheering for me, just in a different realm. And also that selflessness, right? Me and my friend just had a conversation this earlier today about when that phrase of, if you love something, let it go.
Right.
And if it's supposed to come back to you, it will. If it doesn't, etc. I'm like, when it applies to somebody transitioning in life, you've let them go. And so energy never dies. So they're constantly with you. If you're, if you're somebody who's very aware, like I am. So for me, letting her go to her next assignment, but keeping her memory and legacy in my heart is what keeps me afloat every day.
And that's, that is so important to note that everybody grieves in their own way. And we don't get to put a limit on when somebody has their aha moment and moves past the grief. But I would think that there is a way to facilitate helping people move past it if they're willing to take the help. Because I can tell you, Portia, in the beginning, I was not willing to take the help. Now, there were times that there were, like, I would call it breaks in the grief, where I was able to just really be okay. But I spent a lot of years feeling sorry for myself, not really living out the legacy that my mother left for me. My mother was a community activist. She was always helping other people. I remember when I was a little girl, I used to get so mad because my mother would give the last thing out of the cupboard to somebody. And I'm like, how are we going to eat? Mama said, God will provide. She always had the faith that the next best was coming. And I wasn't living that because I was too entrenched in that anger. I was owning that I was tied to it. And as long as someone is tied, there's nothing you can do until they are willing to make the choice to step outside of it. That's why I don't judge when people are so heavy in grief and can't move fast. But what I do is share my story. And I try to impart to them how living in grief is not getting them what they want. And then I tell them why it's not getting what they want and how it's not benefiting them, how it's not benefiting others, and what they can do to move past it. You see, it goes back to those 5 questions again. What do you want? Do you want to live in your room or in your house like an episode of Hoarders? Or do you want to live your best life now where you're celebrating the life of your loved one?
Ooh, we ain't about to go to Hoarders now, Brenda. I think I want to avoid that like the bubonic plague, but you're 100% right. Really going within has been my saving grace. Like, I've had more time for reflection. And during my moments of reflection, Brenda, is where I found my greatest strength. Like, I was listening to an audiobook, and at the very end of the book, it said, you can do hard things. And it's through our pain is where we find our greatest tools to be successful. And so we're going to take another quick break right here on Guru Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. right, everybody, welcome back right here on Groove with Portia. I'm Joe remotely with, again, the solutionist herself, Miss Brenda Warren, and we were continuing our conversation on healthy grieving and also honoring our mothers. And so, Brenda, for our listeners who are tuning in, if they're interested in connecting with you and learning more about you, is there a website or social media handle you can share with us today?
Yes, you can find me everywhere at Brenda the Soulutionist. It's Soulutionist. It's just solution with the U in it. So it's Soulutionist. That's on Instagram. That's my website is brendathesolutionist.com. And you can find me on YouTube under Brenda Warren.
Excellent. I love that. The Soulutionist, as in
Yes.
I'm helping your soul
Helping
to
your
find its
soul.
purpose, to
That's
find
right.
its best life, to find what makes it shine again. I love that. I'm glad that you said that because I didn't even catch that when I was reading your bio. So, that even makes you more the bomb.com, Miss Brenda. But
Thank you.
But I digress there. So, Brenda, let's talk about your T.A.P.I.N method. Okay. I love, for one, the acronym that you put. Obviously, transformation, announce, prepare, imagine, and nurture. And so, Brenda, for our listeners who are tuning in, how can individuals apply your T.A.P.I.N method when they're going through a state of grief?
Well, for grief, to tap into your grief, the first thing you start with a T is transforming your mindset to understand that this too shall pass. Remember, grief is not permanent, but it is a process. And I tell everybody, give yourself permission to grieve. The worst thing you can do is pretend like you're not feeling what you're feeling. But having the mindset that this grief is a necessary part of my journey to healing, to getting to a good place where I can actually celebrate the life of my loved one that has transitioned is important. And when you get clear on that, I do want to get to the other side of grief and give yourself permission that it will happen, but also understand it will come in its own time because it's different for each person, and give yourself some grace. That's the first step. The next thing would be to announce to who you need to, who's in your inner circle that you can trust with these really heavy emotions, that I'm going to grieve this, but I don't want to stay here. Give them permission to help you. That's how you get announced and accountability. Give them permission to help you not sit in your grief forever. That's a real key thing when you're tapping into grief. They make the mindset shift. Then you announce that I don't want to stay here, but I know it's a part of the process, and gain some accountability so that you don't stay there. Then the P, you prepare yourself for that eventuality. Prepare by discovering what it is that you need for yourself to go through the grieving process. Is it that you need to talk about your loved one with individuals, or do you need that alone time to step back so you can negotiate with yourself what it is you actually need to go through this process? That's where you prepare yourself for the grief process itself. What do I actually need? Alone time? Do I need to spend time with someone else? Do I need that one or two people that I can talk freely about my feelings without judgment? Do I journal? Do I meditate? Do I pray? What is it? Prepare for that right there. Then imagine. I want you to imagine what your life is going to be like when you're no longer sitting in the grief. Because there will come a day when thinking about that loved one that has transitioned doesn't hurt so much. You know, when you can just smile at the thought of them and embrace the life and the joy that they brought to your life when they were physically here, but knowing that transition didn't remove them, because we're all souls and energetic beings that are housed in bodies. We don't end. So if we can just have that concept and imagine, what will my life look like when I'm honoring the life they lived and not living in the grief of their death? Imagine that for yourself. What does that look like for you? And then embrace that. And then the last thing is to nurture the thought that although my beloved has transitioned, they have left me in a place that allows me to reflect on the love, the joy that we shared, and that to move forward and live a legacy of love that they left for me, that I'm willing to do the things in the former steps that's going to allow me to do that, so that their memory is not tainted by sadness, but that is lived in joy.
Ooh, Brenda, I love each point that you made using the tap-in method, because it's so true. You know, when you mindset is key. I just have to say it again.
Always starts with your mindset.
Because when our mindset is not in a place that allows or can absorb, then we're a prisoner. And especially when you're in the state of grief, you know, we're already imprisoned by several emotions: anger, sadness, resentment, depending on obviously your relationship with the person or how much time you spent with them. And then also with the process of how they transition can also impact your mindset around them going to their next assignment. And Brenda, I want to go back to one key thing you mentioned when it comes to support. I know for me, I've been sharing a lot in my Facebook and Instagram story, thanking everybody for all the messages and the calls and everything. But sometimes I don't know what to say back to people when they're asking me, do you need anything? Can you elaborate on that, Brenda, as to what's a healthy way, or maybe for people who are tuning in that have been in that position when they're asking somebody who's grieving, do they need anything? What tips can you offer in that realm, Brenda?
Well, I would say for me, I learned a long time ago, when we're in that process, to never ask somebody what do they need, because then you're putting an additional burden on them for them to figure out what it is they need. We don't realize that, but people are just trying to find a way to help. We don't know. We do what feels right for us. And I don't begrudge anyone that was reaching out, asking those questions, because that's the standard. People are afraid. They don't know how to support. So they're asking you, what do you need? Right? What do I need? I need you to leave me alone. I need my mother. I need my life back, you know? And you don't want to say that. So I would say this. Usually when people are dealing with grief and they're talking to me, I say, do this. It is appropriate to, especially if you are an influencer like you are, or someone on social media, go out and do a video if you're able, or write it and let everyone know that you thank them for their support. But at this time, all I need is your prayers. You don't have to call, you know, and you can tell them, if you want people to call, tell them, I would love to have a call every once in a while. Or if you don't need any of that, and all you need right now is for people to give you a space and say, at this time, I'm choosing to go inward. And I thank all of you for your support, but I don't need a thing right now. I thank you for all the well wishes and the prayers right now. When you do that, you've also helped them, because you've taken them off the hook, basically, where they're trying to scramble for what to say or do. Or you could ask for donations to your favorite charity. Oftentimes when this happens, people are willing to give to charities at this time on behalf of your loved one. Those are options that you have. But if you can, I call it, do a preemptive strike on how people can support you, that's always greatly appreciated, because people are trying to figure out, how do they support you?
Oh, Brenda, thank you for that, because that's where I was wrestling for the longest time. Like, I'm getting messages all over Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, my email, and I'm like, I need to tell people that I'm grateful for all their messages, all the reaching out, the text messages, the phone calls, all the things that have come in the mail. I'm forever grateful for the outpour of abundant support and love. But it's overwhelming a little bit, because I'm trying to process, you know, we're trying to process what has transpired, because I think you still go through a state of shock to an extent.
Absolutely.
Depending on how new, how recent.
You only get one mom.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a parent. And I will say this too, so you need to give yourself permission not to read it. See, when you get an overwhelm, when you put yourself in a position that you allow things to come at you. So if you know right now in this emotional or mental state that this is too much, here you go, give yourself permission to unplug. And guess what? When you come back, you don't have to answer each and every one. You could do a blanket thank you, because people understand that. Now, there are those people that are closer to you that you may want to send something. I'll say, yeah, I did see, or whatever. But the reality is, take the time to give yourself some grace and say, right now, I can't answer another email, not another Instagram, not another LinkedIn. Unplug. Give yourself permission to do that, because that's what you need right now. And again, that's why putting out a message of some type, either written or a short video that allows people to know, I hear you, I see you, I thank you for your support, but at this time, I need to take a step back, and I appreciate your support. And you might even say, I won't be answering individuals because at this time, right now, I don't have the ability to do that, but I feel totally blessed and I feel the love and support. People just need to know that, and then they back off.
Well, and yeah, and the thing of it is, you said it in the beginning, saying no is a complete sentence.
Complete sentence.
And not happening to give an explanation to every person who reaches out, because I'm very appreciative, but I cannot respond to every single person. And that's why I always put something in my story every day to let people know I see you. I'm just not able to answer individually right now, unless you all want to meet up at Public Square or something and hear me talk. Okay, but that's a whole nother story for another day.
That right there leads to people pleasing, because again, it's, you give yourself permission not to feel guilty because you can't respond to all the calls, emails, texts, whatever. You may do something like put something in an auto responder for Instagram and saying, at this time, I'm not returning messages or whatever as I grieve. And when you get back, you start from there, and you don't go back, you just go forward from there. Give yourself permission to do that. It's important. And while we're on this stuff about giving yourself permission, I want you to also think about part of the tap-in process in the mindset phase. I discuss with people when I do my trainings the importance of words, because words matter. If you are in grief and you're saying, I'm never going to get over this, or I'm never going to forgive this person for this, because sometimes transitions are tragic in a way that you cannot even begin to process. But you can't, if you continuously say, I'm never going to get over this loss, guess what? You won't. You have to be clear on your languaging, that it aligns with what you want. If you want to lose weight, you don't keep saying, I can't believe I can't lose this belly fat. I did that for years and I wasn't losing it, but didn't know why I wasn't losing. But when I got clear and said, I want to lose 25 pounds and I want to lose it by this date, the weight began to come off, because I was saying what I want, which allowed my subconscious to acknowledge that. And then it became an automatic, because your behavior will often happens based on your belief. I always say your beliefs dictate your behavior, which will what do you call it? It will influence your actions. It's the behavior of belief. If you believe you're never going to get over this grief, guess what? You never will, because you will do everything possible to make sure you don't.
Well, yeah, it's really like putting a cap on your ability, you know, and Brenda, I'm with you about words. Words are the way that we live. Words are the way that we speak. Words influence our actions. Words influence every single moment of our life. And that's why we have to be really mindful about what we say. If we tell ourselves, well, I'm never going to do this, well, then more than likely you won't. Even in these moments of grief, we have to still be mindful of what we're telling ourselves. Well, I'm never going to get over the loss of my mom. I'm never going to, be able to be happy again. Shift that. Really, really shift that and command control over your mind. Like, here's a little quick story for everybody. Every day, I share with everybody, I cry every single day for my mom. But one thing that I catch myself is when I start thinking about the process of how my mom transitioned. Yeah, there were some things within that make me upset, that make me angry. So when I find my mind trying to become a prisoner of that thought, I instantly say, my mom is at peace, because then it stops that emotion from becoming the primary focus of my day. And so for my listeners who are tuning in, really use that to your advantage. Really think about the language that you're speaking to yourself, and also the information that you're taking in, not just through your eyes, through your mouth, through your ears, from other people and from yourself when you're in a state of grief. So we're going to take another quick break right here on Group Portia. Everybody stick with us. We will be right back. Everybody, welcome back right here on Group Portia. Well, Miss Brenda, the Soulutionist herself, thank you so much for being a part of this special tribute to my mother. And, you know, we both have that in common, to really help uplift and inspire other people and to continue living life. Like you said it, spreading the word of living your best life is possible. And so, Ms. Brenda, for our listeners who are tuning in, again, if they're interested in connecting with you and learning more about you, can you share your website and social media handle?
It is BrendaTheSolutionist.com or Brenda the Solutionist on Instagram, and Brenda Warren on YouTube. And The Soulutionist is just simply solution with a U, because it's all about the soul. Soulutionist.
Yes, that soul connection and that soul purpose finding. Ms. Brenda, so July, as we know, is Minority Mental Health Month. And so for our listeners who are tuning in, as I mentioned in the very beginning, you wear many hats. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, mentor, author, coach. You have your own podcast and show called Talk to Me. How do you find balance between all of your passions of helping other people and also prioritizing your mental wellness?
Well, the first thing I do is tap into self-care. You know, I had to change my mindset about what self-care and what success looked like to me. I do a whole lot of things, and I'm very busy, but I had to sit down with myself and ask myself again, what did I want? Why did I want it? How did it help me? How did it help others? And what was I willing to do to get it? And when I did that, I decided what I wanted was to work every other month. So every other month I take off. July is my off month. So I decided that for me to keep my mental self and to keep myself in balance, taking every other month off to do a reset. That's where I take time to go to the beach. I take time to just really dive into my self-care. It gives me a time to step back and look at my processes. How can I automate better so that I'm not trading time for dollars? How do I serve the people I serve in the best way? So it gives me time to reflect in a way that does not keep me in a state of stress at all times, so that when I do show up on the months that I work, that I'm more alert, I've gotten clarity, and I'm able to really live my best life and support people to live theirs.
You know, Brenda, I love that. I mean, the fact that you have literally tailored your purposes and passions into a system where you're able to take every other month off and keep your creativity juices flowing 100% without restriction. And so, Brenda, for you, what would you say was maybe the hardest part about getting to that level of being able to take every other month off and to maximize your time? Because as we all know, success doesn't happen overnight. A lot of it is mindset. And so what was that limiting belief for you that you had that kept you in that, what I would say, 9 to 5 mentality to now you can take every other month off?
The limiting belief was that that's the way it's always been done. You see, until I understood that, again, it goes back to me realizing I had the pen and I get to write the story I want to live. One day I was given the option to write myself a letter to my future self. And then I was asked to write a letter from my future self to my present self. And in those letters, I was supposed to write my perfect day. What did your perfect day look like? So I wrote a thing that I call In the Silence. And if you go to my podcast, the Soulutionist podcast, you can hear it. And I basically wrote that. And then when it was over, I thought about, that's my perfect day. But what would my perfect month look like? What would my perfect year look like? And when I began to set with that, I wrote it out, no limits. I took all the limits off and said, if I could do whatever I want, and here's the key, I can, because the choices I make today will be the reality I live tomorrow. I realized it was my choice all along, and I get to create the story I want to live. So the story I wrote was that I work every other month. I work from home. I talk to women and men all over the globe, sitting right here in my sewing room. And I've been doing that successfully for the past year and continuously since October of 2020.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I love what you mentioned just now about that's how it's always been done. I think so many of us have been part of that limiting belief club at one point because of the way we grew up. And then if we're not exposed to something different, then of course that's going to continue to fester within our mind, within our daily living. And so, Brenda, for you, that phrase of that's how it's always been done, how can we as a community shift our mindset when it comes to mental health, that seeking help for your mental wellness is only for a select demographic and not because that's how it's always been done continues to hinder us from getting better?
I would say the first thing is goes right back to choices again. You know, I have a coach, his name is Donovan West, and he began to explain to me that everything I did was about a choice I made. And I really pushed back on that until I sat with myself about the working every other month, because I realized the only reason I wasn't working every other month was because I chose not to, because I believe the lie that it was only going to be good if I did it this way. I'll give you a quick example. Everyone told me I had to post on Instagram, Facebook, every day or people wouldn't know me. But guess what? When I took my first month off, I didn't post anything. And guess what? When I got back, they were still there. Hey, we missed you. Where you been? I took a reset. And then other people begin to talk about their resets. So what I learned is that a thing has not, what is it? A thing has always been done this way until it's not. It's that simple. And each of us has the ability to decide how we show up in this world every single day. And I choose to show up in a way that is healthy. I say every morning when I get up, Portia, when I'm doing my gratitude, I bring the joy, I bring the peace. I am the joy, I am the peace. I believe that, I feel that, and I live that with my full heart. And I could not bring the joy or bring the peace if I wasn't peaceful and lived in joy myself. And by working every other month, I'm able to do that.
Yes, and you're able to live on your own terms and not be subjected to that limiting belief of it's always been done this way. You're able to take ownership because of your choices to work every other month. You're able to be fully present with your loved ones, your family, your friends, instead of sitting there at the computer while they're all gathered around waiting on dinner to be ready. You're like, oh, I got to finish this email. I got to do this. So you're able to fully live your best life on your terms because of the choices that you made.
I think that's so important to our mental health too, because if we can embrace the fact that whatever it is we're dealing with, good, bad, or indifferent, it is based on the choices that we're making. See, I had a choice to sit in the grief. I also had a choice to walk out of the grief cave, is what I called it. And when I decided to get off my behind and walk towards the light of happiness, joy, and peace, what a blessing it's been for the people around me, because I'm no longer sitting in depression. I'm no longer making excuses why I can't attend or be someplace, because now I'm willing to say, I've decided that I want to live my life, my best life, and leave a legacy of love that my mother instilled in me.
Absolutely. And that's the same thing how I feel. I can hear my mom literally telling me, Portia, don't you dare sit up there all day crying for me. Because my mom beamed in positivity. She beamed in being that cheerleader throughout my life. And she made other people feel as though they could be whatever they chose to be. I mean, my mom is an Army veteran. And when she enlisted, the phrase that got her to join was be all you could be. And that was the same thing that my mom instilled and passed down to not just her kids, but every person who she encountered.
Can I just also say, please know this, Portia, the tears are necessary, because tears help release the pent up hurt and pain that's in there. Give yourself permission to let the tears flow, because they won't flow forever. There will come a time when the tears will stop and they'll be replaced with smiles. So don't ever hold back the tears, because it's our way of saying, I felt this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Brenda. You hit that spot on. Brenda, we are going to be wrapping up here. And I thank you again for coming on and being a part of this special tribute to my mother. I truly thank you from the bottom of my heart. I always love to save this question for last, Brenda, because it is so uplifting and it's a tribute to my mom also. What words of inspiration, Brenda, can you leave with our listeners today? Whether it's someone who was once in your shoes, who the grief and the loss of their parent kept them from living their best life for a long time, or if it's someone who recently lost a parent but wants to do things a different way instead of how it's always been done. What words of inspiration can you leave with our listeners today, Brenda?
I would simply say, give yourself some grace, acknowledge that the grief is a process that you have to go through, and remember to celebrate their life. Don't live in their death. But more importantly, the choices you make today will be the reality you live tomorrow. So choose wisely.
Choose wisely in that order, 100%. I can definitely relate to that. Well, everybody, that was the Soulutionist, Brenda Warren, that you heard from. And that concludes another episode of Groove Portia, everybody. Thanks for listening and have a good evening.